Welcome to the Legacy Leadership Podcast, where we help Christian founder-led nonprofits to get funded so that you can lead well, live whole, and leave a legacy. Over the next couple of weeks, I wanted to do a series on this book, Winning with People by John Maxwell. This is one of my absolute favorite books, and because fundraising is all about relationships, I wanted to focus on the principles in this book and how they relate to fundraising, how they relate to winning with people. These principles have shaped so much of my leadership, so much of my experience in connecting with people, leading people, and even fundraising. And so I feel like being good fundraisers, I would like to share these principles with you, share some of these thoughts. This book is broken up into 6 different sections. They're answering these big questions that are happening, or answering big questions that John Maxwell poses. And each of the questions, if I can find the table of contents here, each one answers something very specific about relationships. The first one is the readiness question. Are we prepared for relationships? The connection question. Are we willing to focus on others? The trust question. Can we build mutual trust? The investment question. Are we willing to invest in others? And the synergy question. Can we create a win-win relationship? And that last one is one of my favorites. It's been a core value of mine, a core principle that I've really taken into almost all of my life is how do I create win-win scenarios? How do I create win-win situations? And so definitely stick around, be part of these episodes as I run through some of these questions, some of my thoughts around them. And so we're going to dive in with the readiness question. And every single one of these questions has some sub-principles under them. I think it's about 5 principles under each question that helps us to be prepared for that thing or be able to answer that question. And so we're going to go through this first question and the 5 relating principles that are in this book. And so the first question is the readiness question. Are we prepared for relationships? And I think this is really powerful because if long-term effective fundraising is all about relationships, then we first need to ask ourselves, are we even prepared for relationships? So many of us, if we are not good at relationships, then we might not even be ready to fundraise. We might need some of these foundational things worked on first. The first principle is the lens principle. And I love how simple this is. He just boils it down to these basic principles and then some aspects around it. And so the lens principle says who we are determines how we see others. Who we are determines how we see others. And this is such an incredible principle. I actually have a part of my book that talks about not imposing our decisions or our beliefs onto other people, but we do it naturally. Who we are affects how we relate to others. The way that we believe about something, the way that we think about something will automatically be pushed onto other people, whether we want it to or not. And it takes a lot of skill to see something from somebody else's perspective. It takes a lot of skill and practice to be able to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and to look at things through somebody else's lens, through their perspective. We tend to look at things through our own lens. My voice is getting a little tired, so I apologize if I sound raspy at all. I'm going to take some breaks here to get water here and there. And so inside of this this principle, John Maxwell, he shares a few different things. He says, first, who you are determines what you see. And I love how he shares these different stories. He first talks about a Colorado person, somebody from Colorado moves to Texas, and somebody from Texas moves to Colorado. And the first person, the person from Colorado, moves to Texas, and somebody asked, how do you think about living here? What do you like about living here? And the person from Colorado says, well, it's all right, but it's so flat. There's no mountains. I'm missing all of the beauty that is there from the mountains, and all I can just look around and just see open space, and I don't really know how I feel about it. And the Texan who moved to Colorado likewise was asked the same question. And the person that is in Colorado from Texas says, there's mountains everywhere. I can't see very far out. All these mountains are blocking my way. And both of them had a perception of what was going on around them based on who they are. And so who you are determines what you see. And I think this applies in fundraising quite a bit, where I'm deal with people who are fundraising in different communities or fundraising in different cultures. And my viewpoint, my perspective, I all of a sudden want to impose that on everybody else. I think that just because I see something a certain way, that everybody sees something that way. I think because the people I interact with within a certain geography don't have money, that all of a sudden everybody doesn't have money. Or maybe I don't have extra expendable cash, and so I assume that nobody has extra expendable cash. Who we are determines what we see. The next one is who you are determines how you see others. And this is a really interesting lens that the way that we look at life, the way that we look at other people will determine what we see. And John Maxwell shares a story here about a man that was sitting by the side of the road, and there were different travelers that were passing by going into a city that was up the road. And the first set of travelers asked the man, what are the people like in the city? And he said, well, what were the people like in the city you came from? They said, well, the people we met in the city we came from were very nice. They were pleasant. They were kind. They helped each other. And he says, I think you'll find similar people in this city. And the next set of travelers passed by and they saw the man on the side of the road and they said, sir, please tell us, what are the people like in the city that we're coming into? And he says, well, what were the people like where you came from? They said, well, they were mean. They always manipulated us. They took advantage of people and they were very cold. And he says, I think you're going to find similar people in this city. And it's the whole idea that what we're looking for is what we will find. When we are paying attention to a particular thing, we're going to find that thing. And the same is true in fundraising. Sometimes, we may have this perception that fundraising is fun, that fundraising is easy. I have a perception that, of course, there are people out there in the world that want to support my mission, that want to be part of my vision. I truly believe that there are lots of people who want to participate in the organizations that I'm partnering with. Now, there's other people that carry the belief that nobody will support them. Nobody wants to give to them. Their organization isn't worth giving to. They can't find the right partners. And that's what ends up being the reality for them. The lens that we're using and who we are determines how we see others. There's some other principles in this. I'm not going to get into every single one. You can go and read the book. But I think this lens principle in general, this first principle of the readiness question, is who we are determines how we see others. And so we need to first focus on our own limiting beliefs. And again, I talk about this in my book, Fundraising Momentum, of how do we overcome our own limiting beliefs? How do we see things from other people's perspective? And I think it's really powerful. This leads perfectly into the next principle within the readiness question. The principle is the mirror principle. The first person we must examine is ourself. And there's a little subheading here that says, coping with difficult people is always a problem, especially if the difficult person happens to be you. And I think that's really great. And I think so often we want to pay attention to the problems that everybody else has rather than looking at our own first and foremost. We assume that everybody else must be the problem and not ourselves. And the first person we need to look at is ourselves. And that's it's a scriptural principle that before we try to take the speck of dust out of somebody else's eye, we should remove the log from our own eye. That oftentimes, I think a universal principle is that the things that bother us in other people are things that ultimately bother us within ourselves. There's things inside ourself that we don't like, that are bothersome to us, and that's why when we see other people do it, it rubs us wrong. And so even when we are dealing with difficult things or dealing with other people, we should then reflect and say, what is this saying about me? What part of me might be off? What part of me needs to change? What part of me do I need to look at and reflect on? And again, when I'm fundraising, I might run into some really hard things. When somebody says no to me and they'd say they don't want to support my organization, how do I respond? Do I feel rejected and feel like I never want to go out there and ask anybody else again? Or do I take the posture that every no just leads me to closer to my next yes? Do I recognize that not everybody is my right partner, my right person to be able to partner with me and support my organization? And when people say no, I can appreciate that, because if they're not feeling synergy in what it is that we're doing, then of course I don't want them to support. But we need to turn it around and look at ourselves first. What is my reaction? What is my belief? How am I showing up in this interaction? And so the first part he talks about is self-image. The first person I must know is myself. And then the first person I must get along with is myself. The first person to cause me problems is myself. And I like this quote here by Sidney J. Harris. He says, if you're not comfortable with yourself, you can't be comfortable with others. And John Maxwell says, I would take that one step further. If you don't believe in yourself, you will sabotage relationships. And I think that's really powerful in fundraising. That first and foremost, we need to be comfortable with ourselves. We need to accept ourselves, that if we can't practice self-acceptance, then it's going to be really hard to be a successful fundraiser. And then again, like he said, if we don't believe in ourselves, we're going to sabotage relationships. And I see this in fundraising as well, that if I don't believe in myself, if I don't believe in my organization, believe in my mission, then I'm going to sabotage every potential partnership with somebody that might want to donate, that might want to support. I'll talk people out of supporting my organization rather than inviting them in to partnering with me in it. The first person I must change is myself, which focuses on self-improvement. The first person that can make a difference is myself, self-responsibility. So these are just some pieces of that mirror principle, looking at ourselves first when it comes to fundraising. The third principle is the pain principle. Hurting people hurt people and are easily hurt by them. And I think this is really this is a really core principle that I learned in fundraising. Again, not everybody's going to respond or react to you in the way that you would want. Some people are going to be really rude. They're going to be really nasty. They're going to be really mean. When you start putting stuff out on social media, you're going to have haters. You might even end up having some people that come and they're specifically attacking you, or they're talking about how terrible you are, or that you don't know everything you're supposed to be doing. Maybe you make a mistake. We all do. And these are the people that jump on you and they want to beat you down. And this principle really helped me understand that sometimes it's not about me at all. Sometimes the other person is hurting, and out of their own hurt, they're reacting and they hurt other people. They're coming after me because of something else that's hurt inside of them. They might be uncomfortable with themselves. It's kind of the idea that those who are bullies in school are probably bullied in some other aspect of their life. Maybe their home life isn't very good. Maybe they're abused by their parents, and they're taking out this frustration on somebody else. And so sometimes the reaction that you're getting from other people has nothing to do with you at all. It has something to do with whatever else is going on in their life. And if I can remember that when somebody inevitably does come after me, say nasty things to me, they post something nasty in response to one of my Facebook posts, that I can remember that maybe this isn't about me at all. That helps me to let go of it and not be so reactive in wanting to defend myself or to fight back or any of those other things. And I think it was in this chapter, I haven't read it in a little while, but I think it was talking about somebody who has Yeah, if it wasn't in this chapter, it's a good principle that responds anyways, is that somebody who has a sliver in their hand, and if they have a sliver in their hand and they don't take care of it, it starts to fester, it gets infected, it starts to blister over, it becomes extremely unpainful. I mean, extremely painful. If you've ever had a sliver or something that's stuck anywhere in your body and you didn't take care of it, you know exactly what that pain feels like. And it becomes so sensitive that just brushing up against it feels incredibly painful. You brush up against a table, or somebody else brushes up against you in the grocery store, and all of a sudden you're like, just this huge reaction, this shooting pain that's coming through your hand, and you're like, ouch, I can't believe that. And maybe you freak out at the person that brushed up against you in the grocery store, and you're like, how dare you, I can't believe that you touched me, you need to stay away from me, can't you stay in your own personal space, right? And we freak out at the other person, but really our reaction has nothing to do with the person that brushed up against us. On any other normal circumstance, normal situation, somebody brushes up against you, big deal. You probably don't even feel it. Most of the time, you would probably ignore it. But because of the sliver in your hand, it becomes this huge reaction. And that's what happens with hurting people, is that hurting people hurt others. And they're easily hurt by others as well. And so what happens in our fundraising is I might ask somebody to support my organization. And maybe they have some hurt around money. Maybe they have some hurt around nonprofits. Maybe they went to a church and the church hurt them, and they see you as a follower of Christ or a member of a church, and they take all of that trauma and that negativity that they had at the one experience, and they all of a sudden project it onto you, and they react and they respond, and it comes out in this angry, vicious way because of that sliver that was stuck in their hand that they never dealt with. And so I think, again, when you're fundraising, just be prepared that you will get reactions from people that are not necessarily people reacting because of anything that you've done or said. It's because of something that is unresolved in themselves. And so don't take ownership of that. Just move on, and don't let that get you down. Two more principles here. The next one is the hammer principle. And I think this is great as we respond to people who maybe are overreacting, or we're responding to people who aren't responding well to us. This principle says never use a hammer to swat a fly off someone's head. And I think this is really interesting, that not every single problem demands the same level of response. That sometimes I need to use a hammer. Sometimes I need to just kind of use my hand to swat something away. If it's just a little annoying fly, then I don't need to react with a hammer. I don't, and it's funny. This particular principle has some resonance with me. I was probably 3 years old when I was playing kitchen with my older sister, and there was a bee that was flying around my head, and she wanted to get this bee away from me, being a nice, kind older sister who didn't want a bee flying around my head. And she grabbed a metal pan and she went to go and hit the bee. And of course, she hit my head. And that was not a pleasant experience. And so I can relate to this exact thing of, we use more force or the wrong response in order to be able to deal with the situation. I had another situation in one of my organizations where I had a disgruntled employee who started causing a lot of issues for our organization. He was posting on my Facebook posts. They were saying just all sorts of nasty things and just getting other people riled up to come against us. And there was a lot of times where I wanted to overcompensate with responses. I wanted to get the last word in. I wanted to say the right thing. I wanted to win the battle. And I wanted other people to be able to see how terrible this person was. And I learned that oftentimes the best response is either no response or it's a kind response. That I don't need to respond back to that in trying to win or trying to be right or anything else. That when I get a negative review from somebody on Google, the best thing to do is for me to post a positive response, for me to be able to thank that person for helping me grow, for helping me see something that I didn't see. Anything that I can say that's nice in response actually goes much further than trying to prove them wrong. Because at the end of the day, I'm probably not going to convince that person that something is different, but every single person who goes and looks at that negative review is going to look at my response. And if they see that I responded kindly and nicely, that's going to go far, that's going to go a lot further than had I gone back and tried to win or tried to convince or anything else. And also, with this particular individual, I spent several years trying to fight things at different levels, and it even got into a legal situation. And I hired, different people to help me with my social media to be able to help me get things taken down that were just really nasty and mean. And when everything subsided, it was when I stopped fighting back. When I stopped giving it attention, I stopped giving it energy. I all of a sudden just said, you know what? I'm just going to leave it alone and I'm not going to let that thing bother me. That's when things just started to resolve. It's like an older brother who continues to tease you. And when you just ignore it, all of a sudden the fun, is out of teasing. And so it's kind of that same thing that you don't want to use a hammer to swat a fly off someone's head. And again, you're going to face difficult people, deal with difficult people when it comes to relationships. And if fundraising is about relationships, then you're going to deal with difficult people in your fundraising. And so it's good to know, first and foremost, am I ready to deal with rejection? Am I ready to deal with difficult people? Am I ready to deal with people who don't understand me, who don't understand my mission, who don't align with what I'm doing? Because if I'm not ready for that, then I'm really not ready for fundraising. I'm going to get discouraged very quickly. This last one is, on this readiness question, is the elevator principle. We can lift people up or take people down in our relationships. And I think this is really key again in fundraising, is that we need to look for the good in people. We need to lift people up around us. We need to be focused on how do we lift others up. That it's not all about just getting support from people or getting people to give you money. And he talks about these different kinds of people. He talks about how some people add something to life, and we enjoy those people. And again, we should be thinking of this: am I the kind of person who adds to life? Am I the one who adds to a relationship? And we enjoy those kinds of people. We flock to those people. Some people subtract something from life, and we tolerate them. So when I'm fundraising, am I the kind of person who subtracts? Am I the kind of person who goes into a relationship just looking for what I can get out of it? People are just going to tolerate you, and eventually they're not even going to want to be around you. Some people multiply something in life, and we value those people. And so in relationships, am I a multiplier? Am I somebody who goes in and multiplies within the relationships that I'm connected with? Some people divide something in life, and we avoid them. Are you a divider? Are you somebody who brings division to your partnerships, to your relationships? People are going to avoid you. And the real key is that we want to take others higher in our relationships. We want to be those who are adding, those who are multiplying, those who are really lifting people up in our relationships. And so this is just the first section of Winning with People. I'm going to do a series on this. Hopefully this is really helping you with just some of these principles. I find it incredibly impactful. Like I said, it's one of the number one books that has shaped the way that I relate to other people. And I truly believe it has been an incredible help in my fundraising and being able to raise money. And so if you've never read it, I'd encourage you to go read Winning with People by John Maxwell. Or you can just keep listening and hearing me break down some of these principles and then specifically how they relate to fundraising. So in the meantime, remember to lead well, live whole, and leave a legacy.